In the dead of night, a cleaning woman's 10-year-old twin son solved a $300 million crisis no expert could fix, and the CEO's shocking decision that followed turned their world upside down, revealing a story of hidden genius and unshakable love you won't believe until the very end. Dear friend, what you're about to experience is not just a story. It's a deeply human journey about lost resilience and the quiet, unexpected ways love finds us when we need it most. If this is your first time here, I invite you to drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing your voice. And if you're someone who believes in second chances, in the hidden strength of ordinary people, and in stories that stay with you long after they end, consider subscribing and tapping the bell icon. We share moments that matter. Thank you for being part of this one. Now let's begin. On a rain-soaked night in Seattle, under the flickering lights of an almost deserted office building, Martha Reyes pushed her battered cleaning cart down the marble halls of Pacific Nexus Logistics. Her hands were red and cracked from years of scrubbing floors no one else wanted to touch. Each step echoed with exhaustion, but what kept her moving was the thought of her two 10-year-old sons, Noah and Nathan, waiting in their cramped one-bedroom apartment across town. Tonight, though Martha's life was about to change forever. Just after midnight, she reached the executive wing, a place she usually cleaned as quickly and quietly as possible. But that night, angry voices slipped through the supposedly soundproof conference room door. Martha froze. She recognized the deep voice of Victor Donovan, the company's powerful CEO. His tone was raw with desperation as he barked, "We're on the brink of disaster. If we can't fix this routing algorithm, we'll lose our $300 million contract with the Port of Rotterdam. This isn't just a setback, it will destroy us." A second voice, cold and tense, cut in. "Our top engineers have tried everything. The data's a mess. It's like the entire schedule has a mind of its own. Containers are piling up and Shanghai trucks are idling in New York. We can't sync the movement between ships and trucks. The delays are multiplying like a virus." Martha's breath caught in her throat. $300 million. She could barely imagine 100. For a woman who clipped coupons to afford bus fare, that number felt like it belonged to another universe. She didn't understand the technical jargon, but she understood fear, real gut-wrenching fear in those voices. The men behind the door were the powerful ones who signed checks with more zeros than she could count, and they were terrified. She couldn't help herself. She inched closer, pressing her ear against the cool wood of the door. The voices grew clearer. The experts were lost. No one knew how to fix the chaos in the company's logistics system. She could practically hear careers shattering and futures evaporating. As she stood there, Martha remembered stories on the news about the Ever Given ship that blocked the Suez Canal, halting billions of dollars in trade for days. She had watched footage of massive ships stuck like toys in narrow waterways, wondering how one mistake could bring the world to a standstill. Now she realized Pacific Nexus was teetering on the same cliff's edge, except this time it wasn't a ship stuck in a canal. It was an algorithm snarling every shipment, every port, every truck. She didn't know how long she stood, frozen, heart pounding, absorbing every frantic word until the hallway fell silent again. The only sound was the soft drip of rain hitting the window at the end of the corridor. Martha's thoughts turned to her boys. Noah and Nathan had always been different. They didn't just love math, they seemed to see it, feel it like it was a living thing. They turned everything into patterns, from the cracks on the ceiling to the hopscotch squares on the sidewalk. Could they? No. She shook the thought away. They were just kids. Weren't they? But as she wiped the tears from her eyes, Martha couldn't shake the image of her sons poring over their math puzzles late into the night, whispering about numbers like other children whispered about superheroes. She wondered what would happen if the problem that stumped the highest-paid experts landed in their small, eager hands. A sudden wave of fear washed over her. If anyone caught her listening, she'd be fired on the spot. She hurried down the hall, her heart still hammering mind, spinning with the enormity of what she had just overheard. She barely noticed the streaks her mop left on the glossy floor, or the aching throb in her lower back. As Martha finished her shift, the city outside had grown quiet, blanketed in fog rolling off the sound. Each step toward the bus stop felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the secret she carried. In the darkness, Martha replayed the voices. She'd heard the words that had shaken her more deeply than anything in her life. $300 million lives on the line. Everyone's best wasn't enough. She stepped onto the empty bus, collapsing into the cracked vinyl seat. Tears stung her eyes as she thought of the eviction notices piling up on the kitchen counter the night she cried herself to sleep, worrying if her sons would have to drop out of school. But mixed with her fear was a small, impossible spark of hope. Because maybe, just maybe, her boys could see something the adults couldn't. Tonight wasn't just another night cleaning offices. Tonight was the night Martha Reyes discovered that sometimes the key to saving a company, a family, and maybe even the future, doesn't lie in the hands of the powerful, but in the hearts of those who believe in the impossible. Because, in the quiet corners of the city, brilliance often grows in the shadows, waiting for the moment it's needed most. And as Martha stepped off the bus into the misty night, she had no idea that her son's gift would soon be tested in ways that would change all of their lives forever. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, let's look at how two young boys could see the chaos that confounded the world's best minds and find patterns that would leave everyone speechless. Noah and Nathan Reyes had always been different. From the time they could talk, they spoke a language of numbers and shapes that no one else understood. To their mother, Martha had often felt like they lived in a secret world where math wasn't just something learned at school, but a living, breathing force that shaped everything they saw. While other kids saw traffic lights or cracks in the sidewalk, the twins saw patterns, sequences, and invisible connections weaving the world together. The morning after Martha overheard the terrifying conversation at work, she tried to shake off the memory as she prepared instant oatmeal for breakfast. But her mind kept drifting back to the words she'd heard: delays multiplying millions, at stake a problem no one could solve. Her heart ached when she looked at Noah and Nathan, who were giggling over a puzzle book they'd found at the library. How could children like them have been born into a life like this, struggling for every dollar, every meal? She couldn't hide her worry. As she helped Nathan tie his worn shoelaces, he looked up at her with wide brown eyes. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked softly. Martha hesitated. Should she burden them with something so big? But she couldn't keep it in any longer. She told them about the problem at her work. Not the corporate jargon, but in simple words. Trucks and ships were supposed to work together, but now everything was out of sync and the company could lose a lot of money. As she spoke, she watched something shift in Noah's eyes. His brow furrowed in concentration, and his fingers began drumming on the kitchen table in a familiar pattern. Nathan, too, grew quiet, eyes darting as if he could already see the trucks and ships moving like chess pieces on a giant board. After school, instead of playing video games or watching cartoons, the twins spread their homework papers across the living room floor, along with a set of colored pencils, their old toy cars, and a worn-out world map. They recreated the routes between major ports and highways, using toys and color-coded lines to represent paths of cargo containers. When Martha came home from her second job, she found them surrounded by drawings and calculations. It looked chaotic, but to Noah and Nathan every scribble told a story. They took turns explaining their observations to each other, speaking in excited whispers late into the night. Noah noticed a repeating pattern whenever a ship's schedule changed by even a few hours. It threw off the truck's routes days later. Nathan realized that if they could track the timing errors back to their source, they might find a way to predict and separate them before they cascaded into gridlock. Martha watched her sons from the kitchen doorway, the glow of their shared lamp lighting up their eager faces. Tears welled in her eyes as she listened to them argue softly, scribble erase, and start over. It wasn't the words that broke her heart. It was the intensity in their voices, the way they worked together like two halves of the same mind. She remembered when they were toddlers, lining up toy blocks in perfect patterns that made no sense to anyone else. How many times had teachers called her complaining that the boys wouldn't show their work the normal way, even though they always arrived at the right answer? How many nights had she lain awake wondering if there was something wrong with them or with the world that couldn't see what they saw? As the twins' drawings grew more complex, they built a model showing two overlapping problems instead of one. They realized everyone at Pacific Nexus had been trying to fix one massive mistake, but the real issue was two separate timing errors feeding off each other like a vicious loop. Noah compared it to trying to untangle two necklaces knotted together. "You have to separate the chains first," he told Nathan. Nathan nodded, adding, "And the adults can't see it because they're standing too close to the mess." They tested their theories with a simple computer program on an old laptop a neighbor had given them. Every time they corrected the timing in one part of the route, the simulated congestion vanished. They ran it over and over, and each time the solution held. Their laughter filled the room when they finally got it right. It was the kind of pure, joyous sound that made Martha drop the dish she was washing, rushing to hug them tightly. She sobbed into their shoulders, overwhelmed by the beauty of their minds and the fear what it might mean. Noah pulled back to look at her. "Mom, we can fix it," he said earnestly, eyes shining with a confidence that defied his years. Nathan added softly, "But who will listen to us?" Martha's heart cracked open at the question. She knew how the world treated people like her, let alone children. But as she looked at the walls of their tiny apartment now covered with numbers, charts, and scribbles, she realized this was bigger than fear. It was a chance, maybe their only chance, to change everything. This wasn't just about saving a company, it was about proving that brilliance doesn't care where you're born, or how poor you are, or whether your shoes have holes in them. It was about a mother's fierce belief that her children were more than the world would ever expect. It was about two boys who saw order in chaos, light in darkness, and patterns in the noise everyone else missed. As dawn broke outside their apartment window, Martha knew the time had come to do something impossible. Find a way to get her son's solution into the hands of the only person with the power to act, Victor Donovan. But how could a cleaning woman convince the CEO to trust her children with the fate of a $300 million contract? The night air in Seattle felt heavy as Martha Reyes hurried along the rain-slicked sidewalk, gripping each of her son's hands so tightly their small fingers nearly disappeared in hers. She had told herself again and again that it was a terrible idea to bring Noah and Nathan with her to her overnight shift at Pacific Nexus. But with her elderly neighbor suddenly hospitalized, she had no choice. As she checked them in with the sleepy security guard at the lobby desk, Martha tried to hide the tremor in her voice. "It'll just be for a few hours," she explained, forcing a smile. "They'll stay quietly in the break room." The guard, used to seeing Martha work late nights with steadfast dedication, only nodded. "Of course, Miss Reyes. Keep them safe." But Martha's heart was a storm. She kissed the twins' foreheads before setting them up with coloring books and a small bag of crackers. "Promise me you'll stay right here," she whispered, her eyes desperate. The boys nodded solemnly, their identical brown eyes wide with innocence. But as soon as the click of Martha's shoes faded down the hallway, Noah turned to Nathan with an intensity that belied his age. "We can't just sit here," he whispered. We have to show someone before it's too late." Nathan hesitated, glancing at the break room door. "What if we get Mom fired?" he asked, voice trembling. Noah reached for his brother's hand. "If we don't try, everything could fall apart, and Mom will lose her job anyway." The two slipped out into the darkened corridor, hearts pounding so loudly they were sure the walls could hear them. The office at night was a maze of eerie shadows and quiet hums of machinery. Emergency lights cast ghostly glows on walls lined with portraits of past executives' stern faces that seemed to watch their every move. They padded silently down the hall, retracing the path their mother took each night. The executive floor was deserted, but the conference room's glass doors revealed the whiteboard still covered with dense scribbles and frantic equations left behind from the crisis meeting. Noah pressed his face to the cold glass breath, fogging up the surface. "It's like a map of their panic," he murmured. Nathan fumbled with the handle, heart leaping when it clicked open. Inside, the whiteboard loomed like a monument to the adults' failure. Numbers twisted in wild directions. Arrows pointed nowhere. Notes scrawled in red looked like warnings of doom. But to the twins, it was as if the chaos aligned itself into patterns only they could see. They stepped closer, forgetting the terror of being caught, the fear of consequences, the weight of the rules they were breaking. Noah pulled the old phone from his pocket, its cracked screen lighting up the equations as he began to photograph each section carefully. Nathan traced the lines on the board with his finger, whispering insights to himself, as if solving a puzzle only he could hear. A sudden voice outside the door sent them diving under the massive conference table, clutching each other breathless. The janitor on the next floor radioed someone, the static crackling in the silent room like thunder. The boys held their breath until the footsteps faded. Back home, they'd tested their solution a dozen times. But this was the only place they could get the company's raw data, the only chance to prove they were right. Nathan scribbled the final steps of their correction on a sticky note, his small hand shaking. Noah looked at the board one last time, eyes wide with determination. "This will work," he whispered. They were about to slip back into the hallway when the overhead light suddenly clicked on, nearly blinding them. In the doorway stood Trevor Mills, the IT director. His face half-lit, half-shadowed eyes narrowed dangerously. "What are you doing here?" He barked, his voice a whip cracking across the room. Noah instinctively stepped in front of Nathan. We're helping," he stammered. Mills' eyes flicked to the sticky note in Nathan's trembling hand. He lunged for it, but the boys darted away, slipping through his grasp with surprising speed. They tore down the hall, breathless sneakers squeaking on the polished floors. "Split up," Noah shouted, veering left, while Nathan darted right. Mills roared in frustration, choosing to chase Noah. The office building became a labyrinth of glass and steel, every corner hiding shadows that seemed to reach out to grab the boys. Noah ducked behind a potted plant, twice his size, heart hammering, as Mills' footsteps echoed past. He waited for the sound to fade, then crawled back into the corridor, reuniting with Nathan at the emergency stairwell. Together, they slipped through the stairwell door just as a pair of security guards came rushing past the other end of the hall, radios crackling with urgent chatter. Their tiny bodies pressed against the cold concrete walls, they held each other, eyes brimming with tears. "We're going to get Mom in so much trouble," Nathan whispered, voice breaking. Noah hugged him fiercely. "We have to make it worth it. We can't stop now." As they crept down the stairs, they heard more voices above Mills, frantically ordering security to find them. But they reached the break room undetected, breathless and shaking. Martha's cleaning cart sat untouched by the door. She hadn't noticed their absence yet. They scrambled back to their chairs, pushing the coloring books in front of them, trying to look innocent, despite the sweat on their faces and the fear in their eyes. Minutes later, Martha returned, her face lined with exhaustion. She kissed their heads, none the wiser to the chaos her sons had just unleashed. The boys glanced at each other, silent agreement passing between them. They'd done the unthinkable, broken every rule, and risked everything. But in their hearts, they knew it was the only way. A lesson was etched deep into their young minds. Sometimes changing the world means stepping beyond what's allowed, even if it terrifies you. The security of what was familiar had shattered that night, replaced by a dangerous hope that their voices might be heard. And in that flickering hope, a plan began to take shape. A plan that would bring them face to face with the man who could either crush their dreams or make them come true. Victor Donovan was a man who had built his reputation on making bold decisions, but never had he faced one like this. At nearly 2 a.m, the executive boardroom of Pacific Nexus was a war zone of clashing opinions. The walls vibrated with angry voices, and the scent of burnt coffee hung heavy in the air. Charts littered the massive oak table, their red arrows and sharp declines screaming failure. But the room fell into stunned silence when Martha Reyes, the cleaning woman, everyone overlooked, stepped hesitantly through the doors, her sons Noah and Nathan clutching each of her hands, their faces pale but determined. Security guards had tried to stop them at the elevator, but Victor had ordered them aside after glimpsing the small figures behind Martha. Now he sat at the head of the table, his face carved in stone, eyes dark and searching. Trevor Mills, flushed with rage, leaned across the table. "Sir, this is absurd. They're children. This is a multi-million-dollar crisis. We can't waste time on fairy tales." Victor ignored him, his gaze never leaving the boys. His voice was low, but carried the weight of finality. "Mrs. Reyes, your sons claim they can solve what the best minds in this company could not." "Is that true?" Martha's voice shook as she tried to answer, but Noah stepped forward first. His hands trembled as he held out the stack of papers covered in neat, tiny handwriting and color-coded lines. "Mr. Donovan," he said, voice small but fierce, "you've been trying to fix one giant problem. But it's not one problem, it's 2 smaller ones tangled together." Victor reached out slowly, taking the papers as if they were made of glass. The executives around the table shifted uncomfortably, some scoffing, others staring with curiosity they tried to hide. Nathan took a deep breath, eyes locked on the tall man who held their future in his hands. "We think if you separate them, you can stop the delays from spreading," he explained softly. The room was so quiet that the hum of the overhead lights sounded deafening. Victor flipped through the pages, brow furrowing as he followed the boy's reasoning. Diagrams of the shipping routes layered with truck schedules, time-lag graphs that showed ripple effects from single errors. This was more than childish scribbles. It was a map of how Pacific Nexus could survive. He looked up, his voice breaking the silence. "Trevor, get the team. I want this tested immediately." Trevor's face darkened, veins bulging in his neck. "You can't be serious. You'd trust a janitor's children over your entire team of experts." His voice cracked with fury. Victor slammed his hand on the table, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "I trust results, Trevor, and your results have been catastrophic." The programmers and engineers filed in, bleary-eyed but instantly alert when they saw Victor's expression. The boys' diagrams were scanned and displayed on the massive screen, every line magnified. Noah and Nathan stood side by side, pointing out where to separate variables, explaining their thought process with words so simple even the most jaded manager couldn't deny the logic. Time and again, the programmers ran simulations. The stubborn bottlenecks in the data streams began to unravel like knotted threads. Gasps echoed across the room as the congestion metrics dropped, shipment times aligned, and predictive models shifted from bright red to calm green. After what felt like an eternity, one senior engineer whispered, This actually works." Martha stood to the side, her hands clasped so tightly they had gone white, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her sons transform a room full of powerful men and women. Her mind raced with memories of teachers complaining about her boys' strange ways of solving problems, of nights spent crying because she worried they would never fit in. And now, here they were, standing tall under the fluorescent lights, commanding the respect of people who wouldn't have given them a second glance the day before. Victor sat back, hands steepled under his chin eyes, still fixed on the screen. The final simulation confirmed an 85% improvement in routing efficiency, far surpassing anything the experts had predicted possible. He turned to Martha, his face softening for the first time that night. "Mrs. Reyes," he began, voice husky with emotion, "you and your boys have done more for this company in one night than my entire team has in weeks." Martha fell to her knees, sobbing openly. "Please, sir, don't punish them for what they've done. I begged them to stay put. This is all my fault." Noah and Nathan dropped beside her, hugging her tightly, tears shining on their cheeks. Victor rose and walked around the table, kneeling to meet them at eye level. His voice was quiet but full of awe. "Fault, Mrs. Reyes, you've given this company a gift I can never repay." He looked past her to his stunned executives. "Remember this moment," he said firmly. "Remember that genius doesn't always come in a suit. Sometimes it's found in the people we overlook, and if we don't learn to listen, we'll lose more than any contract could ever cost." A hush fell over the room, the gravity of his words sinking in. For the first time in hours, hope replaced fear. The quiet sobs of a mother holding her extraordinary children were the only sound, and even the hardest hearts in the room felt a lump rise in their throats. Victor stood slowly, placing a comforting hand on Martha's shoulder. "This isn't over yet," he said softly. "There's still one more battle to fight." As the sun began to rise over the Seattle skyline, Victor Donovan stood before the giant screens in the operations center of Pacific Nexus, watching real-time data flow across global shipping routes. For the first time in weeks, the graphs showed order instead of chaos. Containers were moving on schedule, trucks were meeting ships with precision, and the entire network was breathing as one. The algorithm the twins had rebuilt wasn't just functional, it was better than anyone dared dream. Victor turned away from the screens to see Martha sitting nearby, holding Noah and Nathan close. Her face was pale with exhaustion, but radiant with relief. The twins were asleep against her shoulders, their small hands still smudged with pencil marks. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of servers and the soft glow of monitors, Martha felt the weight of years of struggle begin to lift. She thought of all the nights she lay awake wondering how she'd feed her boys, of the days when every bill felt like a mountain she'd never climb. And now, those same boys had done something so extraordinary it would change their lives forever. Across the city, news outlets began picking up whispers of the miracle at Pacific Nexus. Reporters crowded the front gates, desperate to uncover the story behind how a billion-dollar logistics company was saved overnight. But inside the building, Victor was making decisions faster than headlines could be printed. He sat with Martha and the company's legal team, his voice firm but warm. "Mrs. Reyes," he said, "I'm offering your boys a full scholarship through college, any school they choose, any path they want. And for you, a new position here, Special Projects Coordinator, working directly with me." Martha could hardly breathe as his words sank in. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Victor smiled. "Say you'll stay. We need people who see what others can't." Noah stirred awake, his eyes flickering open. "Does this mean you don't have to clean bathrooms anymore?" he asked groggily. The room fell silent, and then Victor let out a laugh so deep and joyful it echoed through the office. "No more bathrooms," he promised, but triumph doesn't always come without shadows. In the days following the breakthrough, Victor discovered evidence that Trevor Mills had been trying to sell access to the shipping algorithm to an overseas competitor. Security footage showed him copying files, emails revealed secret negotiations. Mills was arrested, quietly, escorted from the building in handcuffs, his ambition undone by the very children he'd tried to outmaneuver. Victor took the opportunity to address his team in a company-wide meeting. He told them about Noah and Nathan's insight about Martha's unwavering dedication, and about the danger of dismissing voices simply because they come from unexpected places. "This isn't just a victory for our company," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "It's a reminder that brilliance can come from anywhere, and if we fail to see it, we fail ourselves." In the weeks that followed, Pacific Nexus didn't just survive, it transformed. Efficiency soared, clients returned with renewed confidence, and new contracts rolled in from companies impressed by the turnaround. But most importantly, the culture changed. Employees at every level began speaking up with ideas, knowing they would be heard. Janitors, drivers, and receptionists found their perspectives valued. A quiet revolution had begun, one that didn't rely on titles, but on the power of seeing differently. Meanwhile, Martha moved her family into a small but bright apartment in a safe neighborhood with a view of the Sound. Noah and Nathan started attending a school for gifted children where their love for numbers was encouraged instead of stifled. On weekends, they visited Pacific Nexus with their mother walking the halls as heroes. Employees greeted them with smiles and high fives, and sometimes when things grew tense, someone would remember the night the twins saved the company and find hope in the memory. One evening, as Martha prepared dinner, Noah looked up from the kitchen table where he and Nathan were building complex 3D puzzles. "Mom," he asked softly, "why do some people only believe in what they can see?" Martha paused, setting down her spoon. She wiped her hands on a towel, walked over, and cupped his face. "Because they're afraid of what they don't understand," she said gently. "But you and your brother taught them there's so much more to see." Nathan reached for her hand. "We couldn't have done it without you, Mom," he whispered. Tears slipped down Martha's cheeks as she pulled them both into a fierce embrace. In that moment, she knew their story wasn't just about algorithms or saving a company. It was about survival turning into triumph, about the quiet power of believing in your children, and about the way love and perseverance can change even the most unyielding circumstances. Their story would spread beyond Seattle, inspiring others who felt invisible or underestimated, and somewhere in every boardroom, every classroom, every family struggling to make it through another day, the tale of a cleaning woman and her extraordinary sons would remind people that genius can shine brightest in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes all it takes to change the world is the courage to see things differently. Martha Reyes's journey, from an invisible cleaning woman to the mother of two young heroes who saved a multi-million-dollar company, is a story that reminds us of the extraordinary potential hidden in the most ordinary places. In the span of a few tense, sleepless nights, she went from fearing eviction and worrying about her son's future to watching them solve a problem that had stumped the best minds in the business world. Noah and Nathan, with their unique ability to see patterns in chaos, demonstrated that true genius doesn't wear a suit or sit in a corner office. It can live in a child's imagination, nurtured by love, curiosity, and the safety of a parent who believes in them. Victor Donovan's courage to listen to placed the fate of his company in the hands of two young boys over his most experienced executives, showed a rare kind of leadership rooted in humility and trust. His choice transformed not only Pacific Nexus, but everyone who witnessed the moment he stood up to protect the family of a woman society often ignored. Through their bravery and brilliance, the Reyes family inspired an entire company to rethink what value, talent, and success really mean. Employees at every level were reminded that the best ideas don't always come from the top, and that listening to unexpected voices can unlock solutions that change everything. Their story also highlighted the dangers of arrogance and greed, as seen through Trevor Mill's betrayal, and how quickly schemes built on selfishness crumble under the weight of truth. In the end, the bond between Martha and her sons, and their determination to do what was right, triumphed over every obstacle. The moral lesson here is powerful. Never underestimate the potential of those who seem least likely to succeed. True greatness often comes disguised in humble appearances. It teaches us the importance of patience with others, of creating space for every voice, and of treating every person, no matter their title or background, with respect and kindness. In our fast-paced, competitive world, it's easy to overlook quiet talents or dismiss unconventional ideas. But as this story shows, embracing compassion, staying open-minded, and giving people a chance can reveal brilliance we'd otherwise miss. Applying these lessons to our own lives means practicing humility when we think we know better, listening more deeply to those around us, and remembering that sometimes the answer we seek is right in front of us, waiting to be seen from a different perspective. It means encouraging our children to explore their passions, celebrating their unique gifts, and reassuring them that they don't have to fit anyone else's mold to make a difference. And it means finding strength in moments of doubt, knowing that the greatest triumphs often begin with the courage to believe in the impossible. Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible story. If this journey of love, perseverance, and seeing the world differently touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a reminder of how powerful hope can be. Your support inspires us to keep bringing you more stories that warm your heart and feed your soul. Thank you, and see you in the next video.